All right, whether each Big Ten defense will trend up or trend down in 2024. So, Pick Six Preview, their magazine, put together this list of every Big Ten defense and whether they would be better or be worse than last year. So they went through and they ranked every defense last year. So, like Illinois is number 43, Indiana's number 67, Iowa was number 3, Michigan was number 7. That was wild to me. They didn't let anybody score in the red zone for so long in the season. I don't know. That's crazy, but still, just absolutely wild to me that they were 7th. But anyway, they went through all of these teams and they essentially said this team will be better than their rank in 2023, or they're going to be worse. And kind of what it looked like is every team who was really far down, they said better, and every team who was pretty far up, most of them at least, they said worse. So like Penn State, Iowa, Michigan, they have as worse than last year. Guys, I know I'm an Ohio State fan, but I am telling you guys, Michigan's defense is going to be legit this year. They are going to be awesome. Now, the offense, that's another question. We'll see what happens with the offense. But they still are bringing back Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant. Now, I think those guys are going to have to play a lot more snaps than they have in the past. So we'll see what more snaps do to them. But you have Will Johnson on the outside, who EA Sports has him as the best player in college football. I don't know if I would personally put him that high, but he's definitely in that conversation for me. And then on top of that, you have the Maryland transfer. I did a video on him a couple of days ago where he is just a fantastic athletic player who is going to be a beast blitzing. So, I mean, Michigan, if they do fall off this year, and I'm not predicting that. I've seen some people say like 7-5, 8-4. I'm not predicting that. I think they'll probably go 9-3, 10-2, somewhere in that range, personally. But I can totally see if somebody's picking them to go 11-1. I can see that happening. Not saying I would pick them to do that myself, but I can see that happening because of this Michigan defense and what they can be. Brian says, hopefully PSU defense drops. People are looking past them, but beating them in Happy Valley has always been difficult for the Bucks. Brian also says, not trying to troll here, but was the Michigan D good because they're good or because the coaches got them in the correct alignment because they knew what the offense was doing? I figured this would come up at some point with me saying stuff like this. I don't know. I tend to wonder that as well, Brian, if we're being completely honest. I tend to wonder that as well. And I've talked about it on Ohio State shows before. Like, this is a very real possibility. Um, it seemed like the offense for Michigan dropped off more than the defense did last year after all the Connor Stallion stuff happened, right? And so when I look at the numbers for the defense, almost just as good as the numbers before Connor Stallions left, I tend to believe that the defense wasn't relying on that. If they were at all, again, this is completely hypothetical here. If you're a Michigan fan, you're listening to this, you're like, no, it didn't matter at all. Sure. Okay, whatever. But the fact is, this was an advantage that other people didn't have. And so now we're trying to figure out how much does it matter, especially when we're trying to predict this year. The only thing I can say is that it probably did matter in the run game, right? If they knew as in depth as it's a run to the right, if they knew that in depth, who knows? Who knows how much they knew? Maybe they knew the entire blocking scheme. I have no idea. How do you communicate that to your players? I don't know. Maybe they did. But if you know just as simply as it's a run to the right, the ability you can have for your safeties to creep up, I mean, there's a reason why they do play action, right? There's a reason why you try to trick the other team into making them think you're doing something other than you're not, because if you can trick them, you have the advantage. But Michigan, if their signs were as good as they say, or as good as people thought, then they were not tricked, hardly at all, if ever, last year. And James Franklin talked about that. Ryan Day talked about that. Obviously, those guys, a little biased, so we can't take everything they say 100% for truth. I think we can all recognize bias. But it's very interesting when I look at the team last year after they got rid of Connor Stallions and seeing the offense begin to drop off, but not so much the defense. The defense seemed to be just as good, if not, a slight drop off, but not by much. But that was also when they started playing better teams, So uh, very interesting. Brian says, even if their defense is legitimately good, they'll wear down in the second half if the offense is going 3-and-out all game. Right. Like I said, that is one of the biggest factors for Michigan this year. Can they get the offense right? Can they pick the correct quarterback who can stay on the field long enough, convert third downs? That was one of the most underrated parts of J.J. McCarthy last year, was his composure and his ability to convert third downs and keep the defense off the field. Even if they didn't score, they didn't score a lot, but even if they didn't score, he still gave more time to get the defense off the field. If Alex Orji can't do that as well, or Jack Tuttle, or Davis Warren, whoever it's going to be, I tend to believe it's going to be Alex Orji personally, but if Alex Orji can't do that as well, that is going to be a big barrier for Michigan to try to knock down. And you can't you can't do what you did to Penn State last year every single game. You just can't do it. It's going to eventually get figured out. You're going to eventually have to throw the ball. And Alex Orji's arm is going to be most likely the key piece for this Michigan team this year. Can he throw the ball well enough? Can he throw the ball reliably enough to get third downs? Or are you going to turn into a team that runs it every single time it's 3rd and 5 or less because you don't trust Alex Orji's arm as much as you do trust your run game or your offensive line? Then you become predictable. Then people know what you're doing, and then it's over because they know what you're doing. Joe says they had a good blend. They just cheat. They did cheat. They did cheat. I don't think anybody can say they didn't, right? I've had some people try to claim that the rule is wrong, but they were doing something nobody else was allowed to do, and nobody else was doing. So, and it was against the rules. That's the question, right? How much did it actually help, and how much will it not being there will help this year or hurt them this year? It's the great question, and it is one of the biggest things for Michigan this year. Again, my thing I look for, the defense last year didn't seem to drop off after Stallions left. They seem to be just as good. They seem to be able to rotate guys in just as much. We'll see. Yes, the Iowa defense. So I don't see how the Iowa defense goes down, personally. Now, if the offense is worse than it was last year, sure. But they lost Cooper DeJean. I tend to believe Phil Parker is just going to throw another cornerback in there who is going to do his job and do it very well, like Cooper DeJean did. Now, they lose Cooper DeJean on special teams, and I think that is a huge piece. He's not going to be able to do as much. Like whoever they have is probably not going to be the playmaker that Cooper DeJean was on special teams. But on defense, I just trust Phil Parker so much that whoever he has behind Cooper DeJean is going to be just as disciplined. Maybe they're not as athletic, right? Maybe they're not as much of a playmaker, but they're going to be just as disciplined. They're going to know that defense just as well, and they are going to be able to fill in that role, and they're not going to be a weakness because Phil Parker's not going to start somebody that is a liability, not knowing the plays and not being reliable in what they do. It's just not in Phil Parker's DNA. So, if Iowa does drop, it would be like a minimal drop to me. So, Penn State, they had them at number 1. There's no going up from there, right? The only option was for them to drop or stay even. There's no other option from there. So, they really don't have anywhere else they can go other than there. Let me pull up this article really fast, and I can look at some more stuff for you guys here. Oregon, I think, is very interesting. So Oregon was ranked 11th last year, and they believe that Oregon can get better. I tend to agree with this. I think Oregon has some very nice pieces that they got out of the transfer portal. We'll see if these pieces gel, and we'll see if these pieces work together like other teams have. But I tend to believe that Oregon has a very nice piece of puzzles put together for this. Jamari Caldwell from Houston, he is severely underrated in my mind. Derek Harmon from Michigan State, very underrated in my mind. What they were able to get out of the transfer portal and those guys, Jabbar Muhammad coming out of the transfer portal, coming from the rival Washington over to them. That's huge for them. That was a piece, that was a hole in their defense that they needed to fill. They were able to fill it. And Kobe Savage, guys, Kobe Savage was second team All Big 12 last year, and he could have been first team. Kobe Savage from Kansas State. Go put on the film, go watch Kansas State's defense last year. Kobe Savage was a very good player. And if he is able to accommodate to the Big Ten and do a good job like he did in the Big 12, this is going to be a very good Oregon defense. Will they be as good as Ohio State? I don't think so. I think Ohio State will have the best defense in the Big Ten, but I could see Oregon having a top 10 defense this year. I could see the Big Ten having Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa, Rutgers, Penn State. I could see all 6 of those teams being a top 10 defense this year. Now, do I think all of them will be a top 10 defense together? No, probably not. But do all 6 of those teams have the capability to be a top 10 defense? With Rutgers' schedule? Yes. With the players coming back from Michigan? Yes. With the defensive scheme and the reliability of the players over in Iowa? Yes. With what they got out of the transfer portal in Oregon? Yes. With what Ohio State was able to keep the experience there? Yes. All of these teams, I just listed them off before, can be a top 10 defense. We'll see if they do it, but they can be a top 10 defense. Another comment from Brian here. It says, jury is still out on Oregon. Lanning hasn't beaten any elite teams. He's beaten teams you expect him to, but lost to the better teams on the schedule, i.e. Washington, 3 times. I agree. So I've been one that's been kind of banging this hammer a little bit with Oregon and Dan Lanning. Like, I'm really impressed with Dan Lanning, and I think that Dan Lanning is going to be a fantastic coach. But if you're going to knock Ryan Day for losing to his rival, you got to knock Dan Lanning for losing to his rival too, right? And Dan Lanning got the benefit of going and playing a G5 team who played a bad FCS schedule last year, right? I mean, it wasn't actually a bad FCS schedule, but Liberty played an awful schedule last year, and they got to play them in the bowl game. And, you know, I think Missouri is quite a better team than I think Missouri is quite the better team than Liberty is. So you get that luxury. We'll see. I believe in these pieces that Oregon got out of the transfer portal. I think they're really good pieces. But like I said, do they fit into the puzzle? Can the Oregon staff put this puzzle together and make Oregon a top 10 defense this year? I think they have the players to make it happen. I think they just have to actually put it together and have it work. Sean, thank you for being here, Sean. Appreciate the comment. He says, agree, Brian. Utah is the most Big Ten-like team, and they smacked USC all the time. Yeah, I think it's really interesting how much people talk about Utah to the Big Ten. We did a video on it, and it was one of our best videos on the channel that we've ever done, because I think it just makes sense that Utah could come to the Big Ten with their kind of gruff style, and I think a lot of that is in the personality of Kyle Whittingham and who he is. I don't know if the Big Ten would ever take Utah, but I can tell you right now, if they did, I wouldn't hate it, right? I'm not saying I'm like vying for Utah to be taken by the Big Ten, but if they did take them, I wouldn't hate it. I don't think it'd be a bad choice. I think they certainly fit in, and we'll see. We'll see what happens with USC this year. He also has USC as better than they were last year. 52nd last year. USC did lose a lot of their top-tier talent that they had, but their top-tier talent was also not producing as top-tier talent. So they were not developing players on the level that they should have been. However, Deonton Lynn, call him Dan, Dan has he had a UCLA at a top 10 defense last year, 8th. Look right there next to USC. So if he can come into USC and this is a talented enough team. If you can just get the fundamentals right, this is a top 30 defense. Get the fundamentals right, have good play calling. USC can have a top 30 defense this year. Am I going to predict that it happens? I don't know. I think the jury's still out on that one. But if Danton Lynn can just go in and say, let's learn the basics, let's do the things we're supposed to do, let's not give up stupid plays, we can totally make this a top 30 defense in the nation. And USC won't be known for their defense, but they will see a vast improvement. And it sounds like Miller Moss is struggling more with this defense than he was with the other defense in the past. And I say struggling, I don't mean that as like he's not doing well in camp right now, but there's just been a lot of chatter coming out of USC that, the windows that you're throwing into are smaller. Guys are hitting with more aggression and more confidence right now. Of course, you're not hitting as hard in, practice right now, but still going in and actually trying to break balls up, there seems to be more confidence, more aggression there. And that's what you like to see. All right, let's see if there's any other comments. Kevin says USC will be fine against most of the Big 18. I tend to agree. I think USC is a top 5, top 6 team in the Big Ten, especially if they have a top 30 defense. I think that they'll be much, much better. I think it just depends on what you mean as fine, right? For USC fans, I don't think fine is 8-4, 9-3. But I think for us as Big Ten fans, we say USC 8-4, 9-3. Yeah, that's fine. But I don't think USC fans are okay with that. I think USC fans have the expectation they're going to come in and they're going to contend for the Big Ten right away. If Miller Moss is throwing six touchdown passes a game, sure. But I don't know if I would have that expectation if I was USC. I think my expectation for USC this year would be that Lincoln Riley is able to still run a really nice offense with Miller Moss, and that you watch the defense and you say this defense is different. This defense is more confident. This defense is hitting harder. This defense is doing the fundamental things that a defense is supposed to do. They're tackling well. Maybe they don't make every single tackle, but they're tackling well. They're not making stupid decisions. UCLA is definitely going to be much worse this year. They brought in the star offensive coordinator and Eric Bieniemy. Deshaun Foster, I really like the guy. I don't know how he's going to do. I just think that's such a difficult position to be put in. Thankfully, they didn't lose much out of the portal, but it's just such a difficult decision or position to be put in with how late he got the job and it being his first job. So I don't know what to make of UCLA this year. I've had people in the comment section tell me I'm sleeping on UCLA and they're going to be, a 500 plus team. I don't think I see it. I think UCLA is going to be 16th, 15th, or worse in this conference. I feel for Deshaun Foster, and although I think Eric Bieniemy is going to be a really nice piece to this team, I don't know if I see him as somebody who can have such a nice offense that it basically saves the team. So. Let's see. Indiana, 67th. I think that's really interesting with the talent they were able to get out of the G5 over on the OHIO podcast. We talk about them as being like a G5 All-Star team. We'll see if a G5 All-Star team can compete in the Big Ten. I think a lot of the guys have really nice size on defense. I think that they prove themselves at the G5 level. So it'll be really interesting to see. I do tend to believe that their defense will be better just because their offense was so bad last year. And I think Curtis Fork is going to help the defense with what he can do for the team. So, all right, let's see. Anybody else that you guys want me to touch on or any comments you guys have on defenses here? This is really all I have for the episode. So unless you guys have any thoughts on defenses really fast. Washington at 35th last year is interesting. We just talked about Kalen DeBoer earlier in the episode and not sending as many defensive players to the draft and stuff like that. That kind of tracks. And so to say that Jed Fish will have it be even worse than Kalen DeBoer did last year, that's saying something. That's saying something about your confidence in Jed Fish and what he was able to bring to the program after Washington lost so many players. Well, they lost so many players. Brian Myers, Silver Bullets, talking about Ohio State, number 1 defense in the nation. I think that's the expectation for Ohio State fans. That is the expectation for Ohio State fans. You have the number 1, at the very least, top 3 defense in the nation. It has to be where it was last year or better because you're bringing so many people back. You got the star player and Caleb Downs to come in. Yeah. Sean says Rutgers D way underrate from. I don't know if you were here, Sean, earlier, but Rutgers has the possibility to to be a top 10 defense this year. The schedule, the amount of players that are returning. Yeah, look, Sean said it right there. They return everyone. I mean, the amount of players that they're returning, the offense hopefully being better this year with being able to stay out on the field. I think Kaliakmanis is not the most accurate quarterback in the world. He is more accurate than Gavin Wimsatt. Unfortunately, he is less athletic, less mobile than Gavin Wimsatt was. So, you kind of got some give and take there. But still, with the offensive lines that Rutgers have been able to put together, and and they got that defensive tackle from Florida State. I knew I was forgetting somebody when I was mentioning the transfer portal. See if they say his name in the article here. No, that was Iowa. The picture just looked like Rutgers. I hope they have his name in the article here. I feel bad I forgot his name. There are so many players remember. Sean, if you remember the name, put it in there. I'll have to do a control find. There we go. All right. No, they didn't put the name in here, but they did mention, and I'm glad they mentioned them. I almost forgot about him, Tyreen Powell, who had a fantastic 8-game run last year and was one of the star players for this Rutgers defense. He had a season-ending injury. He is coming back this year to play, so that's huge for them. I tell you guys, I had somebody when I made the video about Rutgers being a dark horse. I had somebody comment on there. They're like, "No, ceiling for Rutgers is 7-5." I'm telling you guys. I am telling you, do not be surprised if Rutgers is a 10-win team this season. Greg Schiano is the greatest coach in Rutgers football history, I guess, in this century. Right? You can go back way further, but at least with bowl games and the AP poll and all that stuff, right? He is the greatest coach in modern Rutgers history. And when I say modern, I mean like within the last 100 years. And what he's been able to do, what he's been able to build, and it doesn't look like he's falling off anytime soon. Go look at that recruiting class. Greg Schiano is hitting his stride right now with Rutgers. Rutgers, they're going to have some seasons. Malcolm Ray. There we go. Thank you, Sean. Malcolm Ray from Florida State. They're going to have some seasons where maybe they're a little bit down, right? Because that's just, Greg Schiano, how he kind of operates his programs when he has older guys and he brings those guys in. And there's going to be times when the schedule is harder than others, right? And that'll be difficult. But there's also going to be times where Rutgers is really going to be able to pop up. Rutgers is going to start popping up the way that Northwestern was when they were in the Big Ten West, because they're not going to be in the East playing all these really, really difficult teams as they were. They have a much easier schedule this year. I don't know if they're going to make the Big Ten championship game like Northwestern was able to do there for a while. I'm not going to predict that to happen, but you're not going to look at a Rutgers team and say, yeah, this is the bottom barrel of the Big Ten. It's just not going to happen here in the future, in this season especially, because Greg Schiano has these guys humming. They're doing really, really well, and I can't say enough good things about Greg Schiano.